Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for attending this session on renewable hydrogen. I'm François Paquet, the Impact Director of the Renewable Hydrogen Coalition. We are here today because we work with RWE Renewables. They are supporters, active supporters of our coalition. And together with RWE and other frontrunners across the value chain, from the supply side, technology manufacturers, but also end users, we are working towards shaping the EU policies that we need for making renewable hydrogen competitive this decade. We're here to talk about RWE's project to develop a North Sea powerhouse, one presentation, and then a fireside chat, also together with the audience. So we will have the chance to interact and debate about one beautiful marriage, renewable hydrogen and offshore wind. So this topic is getting more and more visibility and has a lot of appeal to unleash the power of renewables, but also the power of renewable hydrogen. What are the opportunities? How do we make a roadmap possible for that two solutions to be married? And more importantly, what is your opinion about it? So, to present you this project, I've got with me two colleagues from RWE Renewables. Rachel Garrett, Head of Offshore Hydrogen Development at RWE Renewables. Please come to the stage. And then Renske Istma, Director Offshore Wind Development Europe, also from RWE Renewables. The floor is yours. We'll have your presentation and then we move to a fireside chat.
Super. Yes. Oh. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, François, and thank you for the kind introduction and also the great collaboration, which we couldn't be more positive about, also from our side, because we really believe, as RWE and RWE Renewables, that organizations like yours are what together make us drive the energy industry. So a little bit about us and our position in offshore wind and the combination with hydrogen and offshore hydrogen, as we say. But as François introduced, it's late in the day. We're happy that we are still competing with the nice sun outside and a nice evening that hopefully await all of us. But your opinion, your discussion is very much appreciated because we believe we have some very interesting projects to talk about today, but there's a lot to do in this market and a lot to shape also in terms of policy, in which we'd be very keen to have your opinion that way. So we called it Developing a North Sea Powerhouse. We'll talk also a lot specifically about the Netherlands today, which is my home market as well. But as said, I'm responsible for the development around continental Europe for offshore wind. So really see how we can make this vision and also collaborate with our colleagues across the North Sea or in the Baltic states. So this is how RWE sees the future, a very diverse and dynamic market. And very much powered by green technologies. So we come from a long history, also fossil generation, and we really see how this gradually transforms into our green world. We have subscribed to science-based targets. We really want to make sure that we are fully carbon neutral by 2040, but that to do that, we need to do a lot now. And as you hopefully have recently seen, we are very keen. We plan to invest 50 billion gross in green technologies and climate-friendly technologies by 2030. And this is what we hope the landscape would look like then in the future. Really a combination of onshore wind solutions, offshore wind solutions, solar PV, but of course also things like batteries, like hydrogen solutions, and that we there also have in the future the offtake solutions from e-mobility, in the short run hydrogen from the industrials, but also in the future to be considered potentially for large transport solutions as well. Very concretely, this is what we see as our core business. So this is where we are very actively investing in. We have clear targets in offshore wind. We want to triple our capacity to 8 gigawatt installed by 2030. In onshore wind, we are already a global player, and we aim to, together with solar, only expand that much further. But clearly combined is also with the batteries, the flexible generation, the hydrogen, and then commercial solutions where we have our big RWE supply and trading company as well. And these are then our most recent targets in that way. As you might have seen already at the Capital Markets Day late in 2021, we upped our game even further. We said really to make room for the Paris Agreement to be successful. We have a target of adding a further gigawatt of capacity additions per year. And as you can see, of course, a lot of that comes from offshore wind, but we also already have a significant role there for hydrogen. So here it might look small, but this is on a yearly basis. So by adding an average of 200 megawatt a year, we do aim to also have a 2 gigawatt installation portfolio by 2030 for that. But as said, the core of it is still the light green and a lot of expansion opportunity that we see at the moment in offshore wind. So I will hand over to Rachel to give you some more detail about what it looks like there.
So let us tell you a little bit about our pipeline and the projects that we have. So in terms of our operational portfolio of assets, we've got a number of projects around the UK, around Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Belgium, and 17 projects in total in operation at present. And we have a current portfolio of 5 gigawatts in total capacity and 2.4 gigawatts of what we actually own. In terms of our asset portfolio in development and construction, we've got 14 projects currently in development across the UK, which is predominantly extension projects, and across Germany, Taiwan, Sweden, Denmark, Ireland. So you can see that we're active across Europe and also in APAC. We've got projects in construction. We've got Kaskasi in Germany, Triton Knoll and Sophia. And those projects are progressing really, really well. But it's not just about the projects you see here. We're also participating in tenders across Europe, across APAC, and also the US. And you will have seen recently our recent success with New York Light, which obviously we're very, very proud to have achieved that. Now let me tell you a little bit about hydrogen. That's why we're here. So RWE really believes in the potential of hydrogen, of green hydrogen. And RWE is one of the few companies that is actually present across the whole value chain. So we can produce the green power, we can produce the hydrogen, we have the expertise to do that. We can trade hydrogen, we can store it, and we can also supply. And we also have a fleet of CCGT, so we're a potential off-taker as well. So we're working with a number of really prominent industrial partners to realize more than 30 projects. So we've got over 10 gigawatts of hydrogen-related projects in the pipeline in both onshore and offshore hydrogen. And we're looking to expand that as well. And that's one of my key aspirations, is to really make renewables, hydrogen global. And I'm certainly expanding offshore hydrogen on a global scale with my team. So we're definitely working at the moment to scale up our projects to really develop the technology that we need, scaling up the projects, and ultimately we want to be able to deliver standalone offshore hydrogen. And just to tell you a little bit about some of our projects. So as I say, across RWE, we've got more than 30 projects, but some of our offshore hydrogen projects, I'll tell you a little bit about those. So we've got the Aquaventus family of projects in Germany, comprising of a demonstrator, a 300 megawatt kind of pre-commercialization scale project, Aquasector, and then the 10 gigawatt vision for really opening up and scaling up with a hydrogen pipeline to Germany mainland. And we've also got North H2, a project in the Netherlands, which we hope to realise 4 gigawatts of offshore wind connected to hydrogen by 2030. And we've also got an industrial collaboration project with BASF to realise 2 gigawatts of offshore wind. And also a Hollandse op Zee project in the Netherlands, which again is it's going to be a first really. And I'll tell you a little bit about that later in the presentation. But that's 300 to 500 megawatts of offshore wind and offshore hydrogen in the Netherlands. So all of these activities with offshore wind and hydrogen is really about meeting RWE's goal of carbon neutrality by 2040. So I'll hand back over to Renske to talk a little bit about the Netherlands.
Yes, because the key focus is then, where do we bring this all together? So as we say, we see a great opportunity both in offshore wind and in hydrogen. We're active global, but of course we have home. And a lot of people know RWE as a German player, but as we say, we're a global player, but we have also 3 home markets, I would really say. There's also the UK, and also one of the core markets is really the Netherlands, where we already have over 100 years of generation experience. We're very much known as a generation company, also with a fossil portfolio. But also here, the growing green strategy fully applies, and it's all about how do we transform this as responsibly, as fast as possible, while securing the supply for the country as well. And that's what you can also see here. We are a good player. We have over 600 employees. We have a portfolio of generation assets in the north, in the south as well. But we are very rapidly evolving to our renewable portfolio as well, where we have already over 300 megawatt installed of onshore wind and solar PV farms, but we also focus on these innovative technologies. So for instance, we have a floating PV farm already next to one of our fossil generation plants actually, and we also focus on other topics like biodiversity. For instance, we're testing a Black Blade project as well in the north to see how that works onshore, building on the great results that were already proven there in Norway, with a significant impact on the fatalities of birds, and seeing how this can also be rolled out further within Europe globally, but also offshore in that sense. So for us, it's really about how do we ensure that the generation capacity is gradually transformed to our future technologies, as we say, also with biomass, some gas, but really as the core in renewable technologies. And then in the Netherlands, where do you easily go? You go offshore, because honestly, we have an amazing coastline, of course, in the Netherlands. The beach is a little bit different than over here. It's not as sunny, but there's plenty of sand and plenty of amazing places available, and very good wind resource, and then a great North Sea area with excellent opportunities to build offshore wind. And the good thing is that the Dutch government has recognized that. I would say it was already a good roadmap until 2030, but very recently, the announced ambition and very recently materialized roadmap with the actual sites here is making sure that there will be a capacity addition of 21 gigawatt by 2030, and that's something we fully support and which we really believe is required to make sure this generation portfolio is in a responsible way replaced. But together with that, there are more unique things in the Netherlands. In a relatively small country, we see also on the right-hand side, there are very significant industrial clusters. And those are really off-take solutions where we see that hydrogen could play a role. There's fertilizers, there's steel industry. You see in the north, a cluster of industry around Groningen. You see, of course, the Port of Amsterdam, the Port of Rotterdam, and also south from that, very big chemical companies, and all of those are potential users and large off-takers for hydrogen as well, in combination with a great experience in gas distribution and all that. So we make the beautiful marriage to hydrogen easily. And we see also a very strong political willingness. So we have named here a few of our knowledge partners, like the very Dutch names, but Knowledge Institutes, GROW program, all that, where we really see there is a willingness both of the industry and the government to work together to make it happen. I will say honestly, a lot has to still be figured out, both in the offshore wind roadmap as well in regulations and operational issues for hydrogen. But because the political willingness is so strong, I think it delivers a very solid investment climate also for companies of ours, and therefore it's really our core market for growth in both offshore and especially wind and hydrogen combined in that sense. And therefore we also have already a few very significant projects, so both early stage testing, stepping stones, what we will call a H2OP project, where Rachel will tell a bit more about, to in the end come to the large-scale rollout of the North H2 and the combination of a backbone, which hopefully from the Netherlands could also go to Germany, to areas like Noord-Rijn-Westfalen, the Belgium area, to really transport to the needs for hydrogen of the rest of Europe. Yeah.
So let me tell you about one of our flagship projects, HubSoap. You may have seen some news in the press in recent times. So this is what we hope will be a world first, the first large-scale offshore hydrogen project. It's 300 to 500 megawatts with our partner Neptune Energy, and we currently consider, centralized hydrogen production as well as decentralized. So starting this month, we'll now start that kind of concept development phase. But this is a project where we want it to be a demonstrator, where we want to use existing infrastructure, so an existing pipeline, so we can actually realize 10 to 12 gigawatts of offshore hydrogen. And this is just to get it kick-started. So the vision we have is that we can deliver this demonstrator project by 2029, and we expect to see a tender kind of end of 23, beginning of 24, where we can get the right to develop it, and we hope that this will then initiate, the scaling up and much further deployment of offshore hydrogen in the area, with that pipeline to the backbone, incorporating storage and mass hydrogen production offshore. So this is a really special project for us. And we've also await National Growth Funding decision in the next couple of weeks, which will really help support the project and get it going. So we called this project, this presentation, about the powerhouse. And what does that really mean? Well, if you kind of look at all of the activity in the North Sea, we're developing offshore and hydrogen, UK, Germany, Netherlands, and we all have different markets. They're all different markets. They all have different rules and regulations, policies, strategy, support mechanisms. They're all in different phases. They're all in different places, and there isn't, that real alignment there. And we see a real opportunity if we can kind of collaborate and cooperate more, for the benefit of North Sea development. If we have the same rules, if we have the same regulations, if we can, really bolster up our European supply chain, if we can actually have an alignment in our strategy, we see as just a fantastic opportunity here to really fast track and scale up significantly quicker. And it's pretty evident that, with hydrogen, with gas pipelines, we're going to be working across boundaries, and that if we can, repurpose more infrastructure, it makes more sense if we can do that across these boundaries and really look at kind of aligning what our vision for the North Sea is, and really kind of plan and map that together. So it's about alignment and trying to have a more seamless market. Then it's all about the energy transition and how we actually take all of that knowledge and how we can actually then apply that knowledge globally to really expedite that energy transition globally. So there's a real opportunity here if we can actually align, all of our activities and kind of have one vision for the North Sea. And I think we'll be able to realise something bigger and faster with that collaboration. So Renske and I have kind of talked quite a bit about what we're doing in RWE in offshore wind and hydrogen, but we did want to kind of pass it over to you, and would like to kind of start asking you some questions and to see what you think about offshore wind and hydrogen. So Francois is kindly going to take the floor, and yeah, it's over to you. So see what you think about it all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the two of you and your very nice presentation. Big congrats on the big numbers lined up over there. You're part of what we call the doers of making a nice ambition a reality. So that's very interesting and good to hear. A lot of questions are rising from these slides. So we wanted to hear your opinion about what you heard. I'm just going to try to get back the slides. That will help for the conversation. No? Okay. Bear with me 1 second. Let's discuss. One question for you. So we heard about this presentation. When we talk about decarbonization, should we prefer electrons or molecules? Anyone has a preference? Who prefers electrons? Maybe you can raise your hands. Who prefers molecules?
You can do.
Half, roughly. Maybe there is someone who would like to provide an answer to that question. You over there, we will give you a mic. Why electrons or molecules, please?
Thanks. If you could just frame that question slightly differently. When we're thinking about whether it's electrons or molecules, I guess my question would be, in deciding this, at the moment we can't build enough renewable capacity for the electrons we need now, but we're talking about building enough renewable capacity to green that in the future and build enough to produce new molecules for demand that doesn't yet exist. So how do we build everything if we can't even build it now? We can't build the electrons now, but we want to build for more electrons and more molecules in future. So how do we fit that together in a very limited time frame?
Thank you very much. Indeed, very topical question. How do you scale up renewables for renewable-based electrification, but also renewable hydrogen production? Maybe one of you would like to make a comment on that one?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And thank you for the comment. And I think we couldn't agree more to that as well. And it's always nice to put a little bit black and white. Is it either or? But in the end, if we look at the whole demand and the targets that there are, we're going to need both of that. But we fully agree as well that one of the key issues is actually the supply chain and how can we do this all together. Personally, I actually think that it gives us an opportunity if we go for both, because we clearly see that in offshore wind, actually everywhere, but the build out of the network, getting enough substations, getting all these cables in the sea is a major issue. And therefore something we haven't even talked so much about here is that one of our clear visions would also be in this North Sea powerhouse to try and reuse as much as possible what is existing. So if we can really reuse existing pipelines, not for blending, but really for full H2 transport, we believe especially for offshore wind parks that would go further offshore, you would have a unique opportunity. You don't have to disturb the life in the sea again, and you would actually resolve a major supply chain bottleneck. So there's a lot to do, but we actually believe by betting on both technologies, you can at least solve some of the supply chain issues and in that way accelerate the total rollout.
Yeah, and to further answer the question as well from my side, the electrons and molecules, we probably need both. The potential of renewable hydrogen is to bring renewables were not able to go before, to sectors that cannot be electrified. And so that's the magic of those two complementary solutions to bring renewables everywhere, in one word. Next question. Development in parallel or one after the other? Who would like to prefer in parallel? One after the other? Okay, clear preference. In parallel. Anyone wants to react on that? Sir, maybe we have a mic?
Well, does it work? Yeah. The thing is, if you take one green kilowatt hour and you use it to displace coal, you'll earn like 1 kilogram of CO2. If you use it to reduce electricity from a CCGT, you'll gain like 400 grams. If you use it for H2, for hydrogen, and you will reduce SMR production, it's only 200 grams per kilowatt hour. So basically, if you want to optimize the use of green electricity, hydrogen is the very, very last way to use it. It's much more efficient for the climate to use electricity, green electricity, to displace coal, hydrogen from gas, and even for electricity in the cars, which would be for per kilowatt like something like 600 grams, or for heating with heat pumps, where you would earn maybe 300 grams, 400 grams per kilowatt hour. So hydrogen is the very, very last competitive way for the climate to use green electricity. So yes, once you have used, when you have displaced all coal, all gas, all petrol from cars, then there is room indeed for hydrogen.
Thank you very much. And yes, the energy efficiency principle across the entire energy system is very important. Very good comment. Any reaction from the two of you? Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for your comments. I mean, electrification will only get you so far, and I think we all recognise that you know, there are some industrial sectors that it's very difficult to electrify, and also long-haul transport. You know, there are just some sectors that, you know, electrification just isn't possible. And I think if you kind of look at it in parallel of electrification and then also decarbonisation with hydrogen, then, you know, we can actually start decarbonising those sectors, you know, earlier. And therefore, I think, you know, there is a place for hydrogen, you know, and it's certainly, if we look at kind of steel and long-haul transport, chemicals, fertilizers, you know, there is a use, you know, and there is, you know, some quick wins there for hydrogen. So certainly take your point, but, you know, there are some wins for hydrogen as well.
Thank you, Rachel. And the reality of the market will be that we don't have yet that much volume of hydrogen today. So we've got to really do with what we have. Renewable electrons are there and can be scaled up rapidly, provided that we tackle this bottleneck of supply and ramping up fast. Plenty of us discussed about the permitting bottleneck. This is one key element to tackle. But for sure, as the scale-up of renewable hydrogen is made, those sectors will have a key solution, and they don't have any other alternative. We talk about the feedstock, so the use of renewable hydrogen as a feedstock. You mentioned the fertilizers as one example. High temperature heat is also are also part of the industrial applications which have no alternative. And with the recent events in Ukraine, more and more industrial sectors are now looking to move away from natural gas altogether towards renewable hydrogen. So this is also a quite new development that wasn't even imagined 1 month ago, at least that fast. Next question. What is preferred? Reusing existing infrastructure compared to new build. Who prefers to reuse existing infrastructure? Build new ones? There is a quite clear preference. What about then reusing existing infrastructure? Anyone wants to take a go at answering that one? Why renew existing infrastructure? Anyone? Anyone from your side?
I can. Clearly, reuse is more sustainable longer term. We see it's quicker to realize our projects if we can reuse existing infrastructure, pipelines, for example, platforms offshore. Obviously, less environmental impact if we can reuse. Improves the business case of our project as well. Significantly reducing the capex requirements. So there's a lot of benefits for reusing. Obviously, our preference is for dedicated hydrogen pipelines. And I guess, that's one of the challenges. If they're still containing natural gas, then you may see some kind of blending in the short to medium term, which, isn't our preference. But if it actually enables decarbonisation quicker, and if industry can actually take on blends, then that's also advantageous.
Yeah, and infrastructure can be understood in the broader sense. You mentioned natural gas pipelines and grids that can be repurposed for renewable hydrogen transport. We can also think about existing wind infrastructure and the potential of repowering those existing infrastructure with the great potential of reducing the amount of turbines while increasing the output, because of the efficiency and size of those turbines has increased over time from the previous generation. So that's also another way of looking into reusing infrastructures for making it cost competitive for everyone.
There were a few people with the new build preference, which I'd be very keen to hear from if they want to.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think reusing infrastructure combined, if you mix methane with hydrogen, makes a lot of sense. But for pure hydrogen, I see a lot of risk in terms of the reliability of the system. Those infrastructures were designed and built with material that were not intended for hydrogen to begin with. And we know they're actually not exactly compatible as is. So a new code and regulations would have to be developed around it. And then from the owner of this infrastructure perspective, then who is going to sign at the bottom of the page that these pipelines that have been in service for 20, 30, 40 years still have enough integrity to now be carrying hydrogen. And also the public perception of hydrogen being, the bomb. I think that there's a huge risk, because if a pipeline fails, although it's not going to explode being in the water, but if a pipeline starts failing while carrying hydrogen, this could completely kill that industry from the start. So I think a much more precautionist approach would be to start with new build that we can monitor, that we know are fit for purpose, before then maybe optimizing with reusing existing assets.
Interesting perspective. Any comments or reactions?
I mean, I would acknowledge that not all pipelines are suitable for hydrogen, and I think that's true. So I mean, certainly, reusing pipelines that are suitable for hydrogen. But yes, it does. There needs to be a full integrity assessment around the suitability and obviously the life, the remaining life of those assets. So as with any reuse or repurposing, it's getting that balance right about the remaining integrity and life and sustainability, and how long can you continue to extract value from those assets.
No, I think
the public perspective, public perception is a great argument as well. And I think good to take into account that that is something that needs to be done absolutely right as well to ensure we don't get off on a wrong foot at the start of the industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And also having the chance to discuss with a lot of industrial users the question of blending and whether we should go towards pure applications or not is a hot potato. One thing is clear is that people and industries want value for the money they put in there. There is always the question of the decarbonization potential of hydrogen. When you blend that with methane, that decarbonization potential goes down because of the energy density difference between natural gas and hydrogen. So you need to put more methane into your blend. You pay higher for such a blend, and you get less benefits for your decarbonization potential. Very hot topic here. There was a reaction over there.
I want to add some things. You know, normally hydrogen was, or is still now, producing from the old process like fossil fuel, gas, and others. You know, so it is not properly decarbonized system. So nowadays, if we think about the green hydrogen as well as gray hydrogen, you know, or blue hydrogen. So if you think about the green hydrogen, gray hydrogen, so comes from the biomass and some other fossil fuel. But if you think about the blue hydrogen or green hydrogen, the concept is very new, and the source of power is solar and wind power. So if you add these things, and if you want to do this in industrialization for internationally or globalized system, then you need the new technology, not the existing one. Thank you very much.
I think this is a key comment. Would you like to react?
No, thank you.
That's fine.
New technologies, I think that's exactly the focus we need to look at. We also have to make sure that in Europe, I mean, the recent events were very clear. We need to move away from any kind of dependency when it comes to energy. Renewable hydrogen produced partly in Europe is the best way to have an energy that is ours, that doesn't come from elsewhere. And I think this is where it's important to focus when it comes to pushing and using policies to support something. There is another element. Blue hydrogen comes from natural gas. There is the methane leakage element, while we know that for renewable hydrogen, there is simply no emissions produced in the production phase. So I think these are very important elements we keep in mind where we are talking about the energy system of tomorrow. Very important, and last point, the competitiveness of blue and green hydrogen completely disrupted over the past 5 months. And this is even worse today because of the war. And I think this is very clear that renewable hydrogen has become cost competitive with blue hydrogen. So it's very clear from the point of view of investment. Moving on. Key question here, offshore or onshore production. Anyone has a preference? Offshore? Onshore? Little difference. It seems that offshore seems to have more potential from the point of view of the audience. Anyone wants to take a go at answering why offshore wind has a lot of potential for renewable hydrogen production? Please, sir.
So currently, we understand that the hydrogen production we have is entirely based on onshore, and that is largely because we have in terms of cost analysis, it's cost effective to produce hydrogen onshore. But if we are looking at the future of offshore winds and the future of the DC connection, we're all talking about the European supergrid. We're talking about a meshed network. So in that case, it means that we're going to have multiple connections, multiple DC connections in terms of the North Sea. We're going to have a lot of concentration of interconnecting lines. So if that is the case, it might make sense to produce the hydrogen offshore, also considering the fact that in the future, hydrogen can be used for, it can be used in the shipping. It can find, there would also be a market for ancillary services for hydrogen. And I think this is actually the future. We have a lot of prospects in terms of offshore production of hydrogen. And looking at, I think lots of companies are looking into offshore hydrogen production. So I think the future for hydrogen production is offshore. And with time, I believe that with investment in research and in technology, we would see offshore hydrogen production.
Thank you very much. Maybe I can turn to the two of you. Why offshore wind is such a interesting, will be giving a happy and prosperous marriage? A few words from your side.
Yes. Yeah, from my perspective, a lot of arguments were made over here, and a lot of things I fully agree with. First of all, I think also in the presentation specifically focusing on the Netherlands, clear in terms of expansion of generation portfolio, there is simply a lot of space offshore. So I really think we need to use the power of the wind offshore to make sure we build that portfolio further. But then it's also indeed about where do you actually produce the hydrogen. And there I really see the benefits of going as close to the source as possible, because I also agree with the previous speaker. If you already bring it to shore and you have electricity and you actually have the possibility to directly use it as electricity, you have an extra efficiency loss. And if you're actually really close to the shore, if you go to projects in the North Sea that are several kilometers out there, you really start to get the benefit. You got to start the benefit of the pipeline competing with the power export cable, with the storage that you can do in the pipeline, with the reduced losses and all that. So you have a lot more space on land for people, for nature and all that. And offshore, you can use the space to actually convert to hydrogen as close to the source as possible in that way.
Any last reactions on this? Last question for you. Do we need more or less regulation? Talking to business people here. More regulation. Who is for more regulation? For renewable hydrogen. Less regulations. Seems that for once, more industry people want regulation.
Yes, I do too.
Any take on that one? Sir, you'd like to comment on why more? Less. Okay, let's go for less. A quick comment on that. And I saw some more over there. Perhaps you can give us your views.
Well, hydrogen is an existing molecule. We have already a huge production of a few gigawatts in the Netherlands. So green hydrogen should compete on an equal basis with gray hydrogen, because there is already a carbon tax, which is designed to favor a green electricity whenever the electricity is indeed green. So there's no need for additional regulation, except maybe for the technical part when old pipelines have to be reused, and obviously safety has to be guaranteed.
So carbon price will do the job alone?
It should do. If it's not, there's something wrong in the whole system.
So let's hear why we need more. Okay, I think the lady was first, and then we come to you, Moitzer. It was you, no? Yeah, you wanted to talk about more.
No, I think specifically for offshore hydrogen production, the absence, the lack of regulation prohibits the system from moving forward. The permitting, the green lighting from the government is just, it cannot happen until they have something to tie it back to. So the sooner we get this in place, the sooner we'll be able to actually materialize this project. And in an ideal world, I think there's a great opportunity here for the European Union, can include the UK maybe as well, to create a homogeneous regulatory framework that would simplify this kind of projects, and we can just reuse the same regulation, whether we are in France or in the Netherlands or in Denmark. I think that would facilitate access to this project.
Gentleman over there.
Thank you. Well, the reason why I say a little more regulation in this instance is because, first of all, there is some regulation that is still outstanding, so it's just missing. There is a lack of definitions that will help us work properly with hydrogen, specifically renewable hydrogen, also low carbon hydrogen, of course. But maybe on your last comment, so you mentioned the competition of direct electrification, and if the hydrogen is then indeed renewable. That's precisely the issue why I'd say we need to have a regulation that will make sure that the electricity used for renewable hydrogen is indeed renewable, and that we have a wise regulation to favor direct electrification, if that makes more sense.
Thank you very much. One comment from your side?
From my point of view, I think, you know, we've covered most of the challenges there. So yeah, I agree. I mean, personally, I support more regulation for the reasons that you know that the speakers have suggested.
Yeah, I think if I may also just jump in here, why more regulation? I mean, of course, the carbon price is important and can have an impact. The key question is it sufficient to have an impact sufficiently fast? So the key question is the scale and the speed. When we look at the challenge to decarbonize some sectors that cannot be electrified as fast as we need to. So I think to answer a few of the other comments, we need more regulation probably to tackle the supply issue. Definitions are one thing. Tackling the structural challenges that we see in the supply of renewable electrons. Permitting was mentioned earlier. The demand, which is also the chicken and egg problem. We need to secure the demand so that the supply can follow and secure the business case for the supply. I think there is a lot of work being done at European level to have clear targets for specific sectors that cannot be electrified, and this is going to help the supply to follow. And finally, the cost gap. How do we bridge? Because the carbon price will certainly not be sufficient, apparently, from what we hear from the experts. We need support to bridge that cost to allow for those off-takers to make the switch as soon as possible. What does that mean? CapEx and OpEx support. The two will be necessary together. And as we move forward towards more deployment, the CapEx will be reduced, but the OpEx will still be necessary. I'll stop there. That was a lively debate already. I'd like to thank you for attending this session. Thank you to our two presenters, Rachel and Rensker. With that, we wish you a very nice evening, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Amen.
Thank you.